These are the 8 main reasons why I think male virginity is on the rise. Number 1, men are becoming less masculine. So there's a quote by Arthur Michael Humph, and it says, "Hard times create strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times." And I think right now we are in a period of good times and weak men. Life is more comfortable than ever. We're not in a state of like constant war. Like, there are wars going on in the world, but it's not like a big war where we're being drafted and forced into the military. You know, the wars we've been engaged in since like the 90s have been like, well, if you want to fight, come on, we'll take you, right? But it hasn't been like, oh, like we're forced into war. Then we have so many comforts, like TVs and video games, and just technology, internet. A lot of these things are distracting us, or a lot of the comforts and luxuries of today that men enjoy don't help cultivate masculinity. And not only that, but you also have a lot of guys who are raised by single mothers, for example. That's another big thing. A lot of single mother raised boys. And when you look at the rates of single motherhood going up, that's going to be an effect, right? Women cannot raise boys to men. It can happen, right? It can happen. But even then, I would say that when that does happen, it's probably other environmental factors, like maybe a coach at school, being around very masculine friends, an uncle, or something like that. But women cannot raise boys to be men. And I think as I've gotten older, and I'm more aware of like my relationship with my mother and how she looks at things. I mean, just for example, right? This is just, I'm kind of going on a tangent here, but this is just an example I'm talking about. My mom was complaining about going to the laundromat early in the morning and there being like vagrants there, right? Like homeless guys and shit. And I told my mom, I was like, if you're so worried, why don't you bring a weapon? Like, why don't you invest in pepper spray or a taser or something like that? And she just completely ignored what I was telling her. And it was kind of the same thing when we had the conversation about buying a firearm for the household. Again, it's like my mom is so afraid of guns and firearms. She would rather be a victim than to arm herself, right? And I know all women aren't like that, but it's going to be hard to find a man that's not willing to buy a gun if he can, that's not willing to buy a knife or some type of or invest in his own protection, right? This is something that you will typically see more with women, like, ooh, I'm afraid of guns and shit like that. That's more of a female trait. And that's what I'm saying, right? That's the difference between a lot of men and a lot of women, right? And when you're a boy raised by a mother, those are the type of restrictions that you're under, right? She's gonna have you in a household where you're more likely to be a victim because she's not interested in the protection aspect of the family, because that's not her role. That's not, like, biologically, traditionally, that's not her role. Protection is not her role, right? And that's one of the things that you're lacking. And in fact, I remember when I was in school and I was being bullied, I can remember coming home and crying and shit, and my grandmother is there, my mom is there, and not once did they ever tell me to stand up for myself. But you can believe if it was a man in the house, he would have said, nigga, you don't knock them motherfuckers out, right? And so that's what I'm saying is that, as far as like the whole single motherhood thing, I think that's part of it. As far as like why men are less masculine, I think a lot of guys growing up now don't have masculine, strong male role models to look up to and to guide them to be able to navigate the world more efficiently as a man. and really programming them to think in a more manly, masculine way. I think that's lacking. And then you also have this I mean, just be honest, like you look at like the transgender movement, where you have men purposely feminizing themselves because they want to be women, or they believe that they're women. You have, I think, also like this whole metrosexual thing, where it's like men being feminine is being promoted. Like it's a lot of different things that are contributing to men being less masculine. But I do think that's a big part of it. And from what I researched, studies have shown that, and this is a quote, men's testosterone levels have been declining for decades. The most prominent, a 2007 study in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism, revealed a substantial drop in U.S. men's testosterone levels since the 1980s, with average levels declining by 1% per year, right? So I'm not just pulling shit out of my ass. Like, literally, testosterone levels in men has been declining slowly over the years, 1% per year since the 80s. And I've heard some theories say that it could be like plastics and different chemicals in the food, whatever the case may be, but that might be part of it too. But I think that overall, men are becoming less masculine. Women are attracted to strong masculine men. So therefore, as men become less masculine, they become less attractive and capable of attracting women. So, number 2, video games, as well as pornography and other sex alternatives. I kind of put these together, even though I think they have a like different effects, but I thought it would be more convenient just to kind of smash these two together. So I'm gonna talk about pornography first, right? So the undeniable thing about pornography is that me myself being a shameless pornography enjoyer, right? One thing I understand about it is that pornography encourages you to masturbate more often. I have no doubt in my mind that I would masturbate less if I didn't have access to pornography. Pornography, just when you have, especially now with the constant flow and stream of free available pornography with all these different tags and genres and categories, you know, when you really get into it and you know what turns you on and where to get it and whatnot, man, it can be a challenge to to resist PMO, to resist masturbating to pornography. I've gotten much better control over it, but the simple fact is this: masturbating more often keeps you in a state of diminished sex drive. And I think that when you have pornography being so widespread and used by so many men, and it's even becoming like normalized, like men now can talk about porn, maybe not necessarily like in the middle of the mall or whatever, but amongst friends, it's not like, I remember when I was growing up, it was like we wanted to watch porn, but it wasn't cool to masturbate to it. Right, it was something that you watched, but you were lame if you were masturbating to it. Now it's different. It's like if you masturbate to pornography, it's not really seen as a big deal unless you're around like some Bible thumping motherfuckers. But other than that, it's so normalized. But like I said, when you have so many guys indulging in this, you have to understand that our sex drive is not what it's supposed to be, because when you masturbate, without a doubt, it lowers your horny meter. it lowers your sex drive because you've satisfied that more or less, right? You might not have satisfied that urge for companionship and intimacy, but you've scratched that itch, right? You're not gonna have the same level of motivation to go out there and have sex because your sex drive is diminished. And I think also just knowing that it's there, right? You might go out, you might see attractive women, you might feel attracted to them, you might want that. But then you know in the back of your mind that you can go home and you can masturbate, and like whatever feelings you might have as far as like the attractive women in your life, look, okay, you can't have them. Or maybe you could, but it would be more effort than to just go home and masturbate to some porn, right? So that's a part of it too. And as far as like video games, I think one thing that people always say is that everything that a man does in one way or another is for the sake of obtaining sex. And I feel like video games prove that to be absolutely incorrect, because video games, unless you're a professional gamer or something like that, video games are something that is not going to help you as far as attracting women at all. But we spend a lot of time playing video games. We enjoy playing video games a lot. And so why is this important? Why is this important? I think it's because video games and pornography, and this is why I put it together, these are very powerful, enjoyable distractions. When you look at the hours and the effort that men invest into video games, into getting good, into like, man, these 100-hour JRPGs and the endless amount of times you can invest into multiplayer online games and shit. I mean, it's really, it's quite significant. And one of the things like me being a 30-year-old virgin, it's like one of the things that keeps me from being worried about like being lonely or whatever is that I have these powerful, enjoyable distractions. You know, I have pornography, I have video games, I have anime, I have movies, like, and maybe at some point they won't hit the same, but right now I enjoy these activities quite a lot. You know, I can still go online, bring up some old horror movies and get lost in them and enjoy myself. You know, I have, man, more games than I got time to play. And I know once I load it up and get into it, I'm not thinking about bitches. I'm not thinking about women. You know, I'm thinking about how to beat this goddamn boss. Right. And so, and one thing I'll say too, when I was in the mental hospital, I might have told this story before, but when I was in the mental hospital, all I did was talk to girls. Like the whole time I was in there talking to bitches, young, old, fat, skinny. Like I was like a different person in there. And I think a lot of it was that I didn't have those distractions. I didn't have porn. I wasn't masturbating. I didn't have video games. I didn't have my music. All I was doing was working out, eating, and just like talking to girls. Like that's all I was doing. Of course, like socializing with the guys too. But whenever I had an opportunity to talk to the girls, like that's what the fuck I was doing, man. And so it made me realize that when you take away a lot of the distractions that we have, and it's like, man, it that can really encourage you to put yourself out there and maybe, you know, do a bit of, you know, flirting and shit. And I wasn't even doing it with the intent, like keep this in mind, I wasn't doing it with the intention of having sex. I was just bored. I was literally so bored that the most exciting thing in there was just any girl that I could potentially talk to. Like, oh, I remember too, like one of the nurses was like beyond QT, right? Like she was beyond, like she was like this white this short white girl with a nice body, cute face. And the second I saw her, I went right in. I remember too, I sat right beside her and started flirting with her. I asked her if she had a boyfriend. She said, I have a fiance. And I never forget that shit. But I like no hesitation. And now I would I could never do something like that right now. Like I got too many video games. Okay, so number 3. I always get so parched when I do this. Hypergamy and the 80-20 rule. So the definition of hypergamy is basically, it's a term used in social science for the act or practice of a person marrying a spouse or higher caste or social status than themselves. It is mostly practiced by women. So when guys nowadays talk about hypergamy, it's essentially just talking about how girls tend to want to date up. Girls want guys who are obviously, like, you know, stronger than them, right? The masculine aspect, but taller, have more money, more friends, more whatever. Just it, like, they want to feel like they're upgrading when they are dating. And the problem with that is that because, one, a lot of guys who are above average or high, or, you know, in that upper echelon, that upper tier of men, they love to take advantage of hypergamy, right? They love the fact that they can have a different girl every night, or a different girl every week, or multiple women, or basically a harem. You know, there are very few men who occupy that level of being a high value man who don't take advantage of that. And these are the guys that girls want the most. And these guys are more than willing to play that game and have their little harem of 10, 20, maybe even 50 to 100 women, right? When you're talking about athletes and rappers and musicians and celebrities, social media influencers, famous content creators, or just the hottest guy in school, you know, the big alpha male on campus, shit like that. Like, guys tend to take advantage of that. And I've said this a lot, but, you know, I believe that human beings, once you take away the restrictions, once you take away, like, enforced monogamy, when you take away people putting so much pressure on you to get married and to not have sex before marriage, to be monogamous, to be with one person, we've taken away a lot of those pressures and restrictions, and we've basically allowed humans to play the mating game in its raw form, in that tournament species way, where a minority of men have access to the majority of women. And that's when we go into, like, the 80-20 rule, right? And of course, I do believe that the 80-20 might be a bit of an exaggeration, right? It's not, but it also depends on how you look at it too. Because I think one of the problems with the 80-20 conversation is that people look at it like you're saying 80% of men aren't getting anything. Like, 80% of men aren't having sex. And obviously that's not the case. But I think the problem when people present that argument, like, they're using their standard of what it means to be successful with women is so low. They're basically saying that as long as you're having sex, you've succeeded. But that's obviously not true. I think 80-20 makes a lot more sense when you raise the bar, when you raise the criteria of what it means to be a successful man as far as, like, dating. You know, I think when you look at it, like, compare the sex lives and the quality and quantity of options compared from, like, the average guys. Look at the average man and look at their sex lives and their options compared to above average men, the top tier men. It's night and day. And when you look at just the numbers of it, again, maybe it's not exactly 80-20 as far as, like, you know, 20%, but whatever the case may be, it's definitely a minority of men who have these very good options available to them. A lot of options available to them. Very robust, vibrant, fun, easy sex lives where it's not very difficult for them to attract and have sex and relationships with women. Whereas for the average guy, it tends to be either you got lucky, you were in the right place at the right time, or you put in a significant amount of effort, settled for less, you got a fat chick, something like that, right? And then just another important point, you know, when you talk about things like lookism, for example, you know, girls wanting guys And not even just lookism, but this can also extend into like finances. Girls wanting guys who are 6 feet tall, right? A guy with a big dick, 6-figure salary, 6-pack abs. The things, women just have so many standards, and if you don't live up to those standards, then the quantity and quality of your dating options can be reduced dramatically. I know, just for example, I've talked about this before, but I like watching the Pineapple Show that Melly Monaco has. And it's like an online speed dating show where she brings up an attractive girl. Guys call in, they video chat. If the girl says pineapple, then Melly disconnects him and brings up the next guy. But one thing she always asks before they get started is, what are your preferences? And she always brings up height. And 9 times out of 10, those girls, they want a guy that's 6 feet tall or above. And the thing about it is, if you're a girl and you're dead set on getting a guy who's 6 feet tall or above, you've already eliminated like close to like 80 to 90, I think like 85% of men, at least in America, right? I think in America only like roughly 15 or 16% of men are 6 feet tall or above, something like that. So you've already eliminated like 3/4 or like, God, you've already eliminated at least 3/4 of the men in America, like just based on that one standard. We haven't even gotten to penis size, money, or like shape, muscles and being fit. And so this is what guys have to contend with. So I definitely think that hypergamy and the 80-20 rule, or more specifically female standards, are a big part of why male sexlessness is on the rise. Because it's so difficult to live up to the high standards that women want from the men that they would rather date. So the next one is, and this was one that was also brought up in that article, social media and dating apps. And I think this is something that a lot of guys have talked about before, obviously, but why I think it's so significant is that it's allowed women to market and connect themselves to men all across like never mind the country, but the county, the city, the state, then the country, and even the world. Right? It's allowed women to essentially expose themselves to the world, to men all over the world, and say, look, I'm here, I exist, and if you have what it takes, you can have me, right? If you have the money, if you have the look, if you have the clout, the social media's clout, whatever, you can have me. And the reason why this is so significant is that you have to remember, before social media, most people only had access to the men and women in their area, right? So it's like, if you were a girl, let's say you were a girl in Pine County or whatever, right? And unless you would frequently leave that area, your boyfriend, your hookups, your lovers were more than likely going to be from that particular area, like that county or that city, right? Unless you were more mobile. People tend to be more mobile these days, for sure. But generally speaking, before social media, you weren't able to easily connect with people in different parts of the state, and it's like just look at Facebook, for example. I know Instagram has kind of become like the new young people thing, and TikTok and all that shit. But Facebook just is a good example of what I'm talking about. You're an attractive girl. You have a Facebook. you've added different people, like you've added different people that you went to school with, different people that you work with, and then people even outside of your immediate range start finding your profile and adding you and shit like that, and so now, right, like I'm in North Carolina, you could be a girl in Tarboro, but you never been to Raleigh, right? You could be a girl who lives in Tarboro, but because you have a social media presence, you can connect to the guys in Raleigh. You can connect to the guys in Pine Tops, in Greensboro, in Greensville, in Rocky Mount. You can connect to different guys in different parts of the state, or even guys in LA, guys in Texas, guys in that's what social media has done. So it's like, if you're not satisfied with the options in your immediate area, then you can look outside of that. And then again, you have a lot of guys who they do that. Like, and some guys have the money to fly girls from like state to state and shit like that. I remember my friend, he worked at a call center for a while. No, let me think. Now, I'm trying to get the story right, but it was either a girl, because remember, I'm in North Carolina. So it was a girl that he knew at the call center he worked at, or at college. I forgot which one. But he said that girl got flown out by DJ Academics or some shit like that, right? I don't know how true that story is, but I don't have any reason to not believe it, because this is something that just happens anyway, right? But he was saying that this girl that he knows, or at least was an associate of, he found out she got flown out by DJ Academics. Now, I'm pretty sure he's not in North Carolina. So that's just an example of what's going on now, right? Girls from my state, girls that from my area can get flown out by famous or semi-famous like YouTube rappers or whatever the fuck, right? And that's just something that's available to women now. And the other thing too is, women had to rely a lot more on guys approaching them in real life, and that's a lot more difficult than like sliding in DMs and shit like that. So now it's like, even guys who normally wouldn't like code approach, they can slide in DMs, and that's another thing that women have on their side. And then you also have like OnlyFans, and like you got things like OnlyFans or Twitch and simp culture too, right? It's not just how social media has expanded women's dating options, but it's also allowed them to receive so much attention from men, even men that they wouldn't have no interest in dating. They're getting attention from these guys. They're getting likes, they're getting donations. So that's a whole nother aspect to it too, where, because you have to understand, one of the side effects of like simp culture, so to speak, or beta orbiters, is that all of this plays into elevating and inflating the egos of women. As their followers go up and their likes go up and they get more social media clout, like their value is going up based on simps and betas and thirsty niggas, right? So not only are they getting money and attention, their value on the dating market is going up as well. They're more visible to a higher class of men, right? It's so funny. It's almost like poetry, man. Like they're being elevated by low tier men and becoming more visible to men of a higher tier, right? But that's definitely part of it too. Social media and dating apps. So the next one is the Manosphere and the exposure of female nature. Now, when we talk about the Manosphere, we could talk about, we could include Red Pill, MGTOW, groups like that. But, excuse me. Oh, goddamn. Hold up. Okay. But the reason why I think this is a part of why male sexishness is going up, See, now we're getting into like the voluntary side of it, right? Because especially when you look at like MGTOW is men purposefully and intentionally avoiding sex and relationships. But on the red pill side of things, you know, we talking about the red pill, there's usually not an emphasis on avoiding sex and women, but I mean, at least as far as like not long term. But I think one thing that's similar between like the red pill and MGTOW, for example, is that in general, men are being taught not to focus on women. Like that's the game now for like average guys, is don't focus on women. You know, focus on your grind, focus on your purpose, right? That's what AMS always says, alpha male strategy. You know, instead of focusing on women, focus on your purpose, elevate your value on the dating market, then worry about women. So a lot of guys aren't necessarily like these sad basement dwelling incels. Some of these guys who aren't having sex is done intentionally because they're focusing on other things. Like I know one of my friends, he's been with quite a few women. He's been with, from what he said, maybe like 50 plus women over the course of his life. Now, you know, of course, that's not like super alpha or nothing like that, but you know, those are decent numbers. But recently, you know, he's really just been out of the dating game and focusing almost entirely on himself. I think that maybe he might have had like a hookup or two in the past few years, but he's really slowed down a lot, and it's been done intentionally because he wanted to focus on himself. Right. This again, he's not a virgin. He's had girlfriends and shit like that, but he made a conscious decision to not focus on dating. And that's another aspect to why male sexlessness and is going up. Why a lot of men are not in relationships is because this red pill ideology, whether you agree with it or not, has only gotten bigger over time. When you look at the popularity of, like, you know, Kevin Samuels, Fresh and Fit, AMS, Rollo Tomasi, Coach Greg Adams, Anthony Spade, other guy, Dr. BOA. A lot of these guys, even O'Shea, you know, as these guys become more popular, you look at their popularity and their influence on men. And one thing that they tend to have in common is that this idea of focusing on yourself, not being thirsty, having higher standards, not getting married. You know, a lot of guys are promoting these ideas, and I'm saying, again, you don't have to agree with them, but the fact is, these types of ideas are becoming more and more popular. You know, don't move in with women. Don't code approach women. Don't pay for dates. Monk mode. Like all this. Come on. Like these ideas, these rules are becoming more popular. And I think the thing about this particular strategy, though, what's problematic about it is that I definitely agree for the most part. Me personally, I agree with these strategies. But I think the problem with it is that while you're focusing on yourself, while you're focusing on raising your value, you're pretty much out of the dating game. Now, not all guys, but I think a lot of guys tend to go to the extreme, or you have some guys who are like below average or average, and they're using these strategies, and for them, it's going to be worse because they don't have the level of attractiveness in that moment to practice these things and continue to date, right? Just for example, if you're telling guys to have higher standards, you know, don't date fat chicks, don't date single moms and shit, that might be all you can get at your level. Right? But if you adopt this idea of not settling for that, then you're going to be out of the dating game until you raise your own value to get something better, right? Again, I'm not, there's nothing wrong with that, but I'm just saying, if we're talking about why more and more men are virgins, why more and more men are single or having less sex, you have to throw this in there. A lot of guys, this is done with intention, right? And a lot of the dating strategies promoted within the manosphere, it requires men to avoid women until creating self-value. And this takes a lot of time. And the other side that I was talking about was the exposure of female nature. You know, a lot of these channels and personalities, they focus on social media content that shows the uglier side of women. You know, just think about on R9K, for example. They have those women hate threads, and those threads are filled with pictures and articles and examples of modern women just being absolute awful people, showing themselves being like so unattractive or doing bad things. And I think it deters men from wanting to enter the dating game in the first place. You know, like, just for example, you have like the whole Jeremy Meeks thing, right? And the men in general realizing that women have this thing for bad boys, right? You know, this is an example of like female nature being exposed and making them look less attractive. And then you have like these things as far as like gold diggers being exposed, slut culture, you know. I think a lot of these things, especially when you're talking about like social media, right? Like women kind of either exposing themselves or just being exposed as being like shallow, as being toxic, as being just all around just people that you don't want to deal with, right? And obviously that's not all women, but I think that like when you get involved in the manosphere, MGTOW, red pill, the unfortunate, I think it's important, but it's unfortunate too, is that you're getting like this flood of negative examples of female behavior, right? And some of it is just based in their nature, but I think that it could be, it's kind of a one-sided, it's kind of one-sided in how it tends to portray women, right? When you dive into the manosphere and the red pill, they tend to focus on what can go wrong. They tend to focus on the type of women that you should avoid. And I think that has a big effect on men psychologically and how they perceive relationships. And then you go into MGTOW, right? The juice isn't worth the squeeze. I don't want to deal with it.